Adventures of Harry Nile.
The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. Not the kind of rain that washes things clean. The kind that seeps into your bones and turns every shadow into something watching you. Seattle in November does that to a man. Makes him wonder why he ever left Chicago, where at least the cold was honest about its intentions. I was sitting in my office at the end of a long hallway in a building that had seen better decades. The window fogged up so thick I couldn't see the street below, but I didn't need to. I knew what was down there. Wet pavement, dim streetlights, the occasional cab splashing through puddles deep enough to drown a man's hopes. My desk was a mess of unpaid bills, cold coffee, and a half-empty bottle of rye I kept in the bottom drawer for emergencies. This wasn't an emergency. Just a Tuesday. The buzzer rang. I let it ring twice before I bothered to move. Could have been a salesman, could have been a cop with a grudge, could have been nobody worth the effort of standing up. Third ring. Persistent. I pushed back my chair, crossed the worn carpet to the door, and opened it to find a woman who didn't belong in a place like this. She was maybe 35, dressed in a coat that cost more than my monthly rent, dark hair pinned up neat, face carefully composed, but her hands gave her away. She was twisting a leather glove like she was trying to wring the truth out of it. "Mr. Nile? Depends who's asking." She didn't smile. "My name is Eleanor Marchetti. I need to hire a private investigator." I stepped aside. "Come in. Watch the floor. There's a spot by the radiator that's rotted through." She stepped past me, and I caught a whiff of something expensive. Gardenia, maybe. Not the kind of perfume you wear to visit a 2-bit detective in a 5-bit office. "Sit anywhere. The chair with the torn armrest is more comfortable than it looks." She chose the one by the window. Smart. She could see the door in the hallway. "Can I get you something? Coffee's been sitting since this morning, but it's still warm if you like your brew with a kick." "I'm fine, thank you." I sat back down behind my desk, leaned back, and waited. That's the first rule of this business. Let them talk first. People will tell you everything you need to know if you just give them room to fill the silence. "I need you to find my husband," she said. "What's his name?" "Arthur Marchetti. He's been missing for 5 days." "5 days and you're only coming to me now? Police give you the runaround?" She looked away. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or guilt. It's hard to tell the difference sometimes. "The police, they're not interested. Arthur's business dealings are complicated." "Complicated how?" "He deals in imported goods, antiques, artwork, that sort of thing. He has partners who aren't always legitimate." I pulled out a cigarette, lit it, watched the smoke curl toward the water-stained ceiling. "So you're telling me your husband's connected, and now he's missing?" "Yes. And you want me to find him before the cops do? Before his partners find out he's gone?" "Yes." "You know what that sounds like, Mrs. Marchetti." "Like a problem," she said flatly. "It sounds like a problem," I agreed. "Let's start with something simple. Why do you think he's still alive?" She didn't flinch at the question. That was interesting. Most wives at least pretend to be offended when you suggest their husband might be dead. "Because Arthur is careful. He didn't get where he is by being careless. If something had happened to him, there would be a reason. A man like Arthur Marchetti doesn't just disappear without leaving a trail. Unless the trail leads somewhere he doesn't want to be found." That made her pause. She looked at her hands, the glove now twisted into a knot. "There's something else," I said. "Something you're not telling me. He had a mistress." "Ah, there it is. I found out about her 3 weeks ago. A woman named Diane Cross. She works at a gallery downtown." "You confront him?" "I confronted her. She denied it. But I found letters, hotel receipts. I know what I know." "So you fought. He left, and now you want me to find him so you can, what? Make him come home? Serve him divorce papers? Shoot him in a jealous rage?" She looked up sharply. "I want to know if he's alive, that's all. Whatever he's done, I need to know." The cigarette had burned to the filter. I stubbed it out in an ashtray that hadn't been emptied since the Truman administration. "Here's how this works, Mrs. Marchetti. I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to answer them honestly. If I catch you lying to me, I'll find out, and then I'll walk away and you can find yourself another detective to charm." "Fair enough. Where does your husband work?" "He has an office in the Pioneer Building. He also keeps a warehouse down by the docks." What's his business called? Marchetti Imports. Never heard of it. You wouldn't have. Arthur doesn't advertise. Who were the last people to see him? His secretary, a woman named Patricia Vance. She said he left the office around 6 on Thursday and said he was going home. He never arrived. Did the secretary seem nervous when you asked about him? She was guarded, protective. I always thought she knew more than she let on. You think she was the mistress? I don't know. But she's young, pretty. Arthur likes pretty young women. I wrote it in my notebook. Address for the office? I wrote it down for you. She slid a card across my desk. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind of card that says, I've never had to worry about money. What about the warehouse? Who manages that? A man named Lou Cutler. He's been with Arthur for years, runs the dock operations. Cutler knows you're looking for your husband? She shook her head. I thought it better to keep this contained. Contained, right, because the wife of a missing importer asking questions at the docks is definitely going to go unnoticed. I hired you so I wouldn't have to do it myself. Fair point. What about the mistress, this Diane Cross? Is she still working at the gallery? I don't know. I haven't been back. Where's the gallery? On First Avenue, the Maxwell Gallery. I wrote it down. One more thing, Mrs. Marchetti. What do you think happened to your husband? She sat silent for a long moment. The rain drummed against the window like it was trying to get in. Like it had something to tell me but couldn't find the words. I think someone killed him, she said finally. I think he got in too deep with the wrong people, and they decided he was worth more dead than alive. You think his partners had him killed? I think I want to know who killed my husband, and I think you're the only person who can find out. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope thick enough to choke a horse, laid it on my desk between us. $2,500, half now, half when you bring me answers. I looked at the envelope, then at her, then back at the envelope. That's a lot of money for a man nobody's reported missing. My husband is missing. I'm reporting to him. Take the money, Mr. Nile. Find Arthur. Find the truth. That's all I want. She stood up, smoothed her coat, and walked to the door. She paused with her hand on the knob. One more thing. Arthur had a scar on his left hand, an old burn from when he was in the Navy. If you find a body, it's the easiest way to identify him. Thanks for the heads up. She left. I sat there for a long minute, staring at the envelope, listening to the rain. $2,500. That wasn't pocket change. That was the kind of money that said either she was desperate or she was hiding something bigger than a missing husband. Maybe both. People like Eleanor Marchetti don't pay that kind of cash for a simple missing persons case. She was paying for answers she didn't want to find herself. Answers someone might kill to keep buried. I opened the envelope, counted the bills, then tucked the cash into my safe. The safe was an old model, maybe the only thing in this office worth stealing. I spun the dial, locked it, and sat back down. Murphy. I needed to call Murphy. She'd know something about this Marchetti character. She had a memory for names and a knack for digging dirt. I grabbed the phone and dialed. Murphy, it's Harry. I need you to run a name for me. Arthur Marchetti. Import-export. Connected types, maybe. See what you can find. Always the quiet ones, I muttered to myself, staring at the rain-streaked window. 3 days of rain, 5 days missing, $2,500. Something didn't add up. But in this city, in this line of work, it never does. I reached for my coat, grabbed my hat, and headed for the door. If Arthur Marchetti was alive, I'd find him. And if he was dead, I'd find out who put him in the ground. Either way, I needed a drink. And the only place to get a decent one this time of night was a joint called the Rusty Nail on the waterfront. The streets were wet, the air was cold, and somewhere out there in the rain, a dead man was waiting for me to find his killer. I lit another cigarette and walked into the dark. The Rusty Nail sat at the end of a pier that had been condemned twice and ignored 3 times. It was the kind of place where the sawdust on the floor was older than half the patrons and the jukebox only played songs from the last war. If you wanted a quiet drink in a dark corner, this was your spot. If you wanted trouble, you could find that here too. You just had to look a little harder. The bartender was a man named Mickey Coletti. He'd been pouring drinks since before Prohibition ended, and he had a memory for faces that would put a police file to shame. We had an arrangement. He gave me information when I needed it, and I didn't tell the cops about the side business he ran out of the back room. Mickey saw me walk in and already had a glass of rye on the bar before I could sit down. "Harry, you look like you lost a fight with a streetcar. Just a long week, Mickey, and it's only Tuesday." I took the glass, let the whiskey burn its way down, and felt some of the chill leave my bones. The rain had soaked through my coat and my hat was dripping onto the bar. Mickey slipped me a napkin without being asked. "Something on your mind, or are you just here to watch the water? Arthur Marchetti, does it mean anything to you?" Mickey's hand paused on the glass he was wiping. That was a tell, a small one, but I caught it. "Marchetti, import guy, runs a warehouse down on Pier 47. That one. What about him? Missing, 5 days. My wife hired me to find him." Mickey set down the glass and leaned on the bar, his voice dropping low enough that the regulars at the other end couldn't hear. "You sure you want to poke around in that nest, Harry? Marchetti wasn't just importing antiques. I figured as much. He had a partner, name of Silas Vance. Worked at the docks together for years. Then Vance turned up dead about 18 months ago. The official word was a mugging gone wrong, but nobody who knew them believed it." "Vance, related to his secretary?" Mickey nodded. "Daughter, Patricia Vance. She went to work for Marchetti after her father died. Some folks said it was guilt money. Others said she was trying to find out what really happened. You got a take on it?" Mickey shrugged. "I got a take on everything, but I like my teeth where they are. Let's just say Marchetti had friends in places that don't show up in the phone book." "Who are we talking about?" "Man named Leo Barone, runs a lot of the action on the waterfront. Fancy suits, fancy cars, and a temper that doesn't quit. Marchetti had some deal with Barone. I don't know the specifics, but I know it wasn't above board." I finished my drink, set the glass down, and slid a 10 across the bar. "Leo Barone, that's a start. What about the mistress, Diane Cross?" Mickey pocketed the bill. "Works at Maxwell Gallery. A friend of mine says she was seen with Marchetti at a hotel in Tacoma a few weeks back. Could be nothing, could be everything." "Where does Barone hang his hat?" "Club called the Blue Parrot, down on Jackson. You walk in there, Harry, you don't walk out the same way you came in." "I'll take my chances. Always do." Mickey shook his head and reached for another glass. "Watch your back, pal." I stepped back out into the rain, pulled my collar up, and headed for the nearest payphone. The booth smelled like stale beer and desperation, but the phone worked. I dropped a nickel and dialed Murphy's number. She answered on the second ring. "Murphy speaking. It's me. Got anything on Marchetti?" "Already digging. The man's a ghost. No record before 1939. Just shows up in Seattle after the war. Starts buying up property on the waterfront. But get this. His business license lists a partner. Silas Vance. You know him. Know of him. He's dead." "Right. And here's the interesting part. Vance died on November 6th, which, coincidentally, is the same date Marchetti's wife came to see you." I felt the pieces clicking together in the back of my head. Hold on. November 6th. That was 5 days ago. The day Marchetti disappeared. Told you it was interesting. Also, I called the Maxwell Gallery. Diane Cross hasn't shown up for work since last Thursday, and when I asked about her, the gallery owner hung up on me. "You didn't tell him who you were." I told him I was a friend. He didn't believe me. "Great. Anything else?" "One more thing. I found an old news clipping from 42. The FBI questioned Marchetti about stolen art being shipped out of the port. Nothing came of it, but the file's there. A friend at the precinct says it was open for 6 months and then just closed. Closed by who? He didn't say, but he sounded nervous. And that's the thing with cops in this city, Harry. They only get nervous when they're being leaned on." I thanked her, hung up, and stood in the rain for a minute, letting it wash over me. Marchetti, Barone, Vance, Cross. They were all connected, and the thread was getting tangled the more I pulled. I decided to start at the source, the warehouse on Pier 47. The docks at night are a different world. The fog rolls in thick enough to swallow a man whole, and the only light comes from the occasional ship's lantern or a distant street lamp flickering like it's about to give up the ghost. I walked the length of the pier, my footsteps echoing on the wet wood, until I found the sign, Marchetti Imports. The front door was locked, but I didn't come for the front door. I circled around back, found a window with a rusty latch, and jimmied it open with a pocket knife I'd been carrying since Korea. The glass was cold against my fingers as I slid inside. The warehouse smelled like brine, mold, and money. The kind of money that leaves a stain. Crates stacked high against the walls, a desk in the corner buried under paperwork, and a filing cabinet that was begging to be opened. I started with the desk. Bills of lading, mostly. Shipments from Europe, Asia, South America. Antiques, furniture, rugs. All of it seemed clean enough. But underneath a pile of invoices, I found something different. A second ledger, hidden in a false bottom of the top drawer. I pulled it out, flipped through the pages. The handwriting was tight, almost cramped, and the entries were all in code. Numbers, letters, dates. But one thing stood out. Every page had the same notation in the margin. LB, 45%, Leo Barone. Taking 45% of everything Marchetti moved. That wasn't a partnership. That was protection money. I tucked the ledger into my coat and kept digging. The filing cabinet was stuffed with old correspondence, most of it business-related, but near the back I found a folder marked Silas Vance. Inside were letters, bank statements, and a photograph of Vance with a woman who had his same eyes. Patricia Vance, the secretary. And there, at the bottom of the folder, was a clipping from the Seattle Times dated November 6, 1945. It reported that Silas Vance had been found dead near the waterfront. Cause of death, a single gunshot wound to the chest. The case was closed. No suspects, no arrests. I was about to put the folder back when I noticed something stuck to the inside of the flap. A matchbook. The blue parrot. I didn't need to guess who had been in this office last. The same man who'd been collecting his cut every month. I heard footsteps outside. Heavy boots. 2 sets. And the unmistakable sound of a safety clicking off. I moved fast. The window was my only way out, and I got there just as the door swung open. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, and a voice called out, "Hey, who's there?" I didn't stop to answer. I hit the window, squeezed through, and landed hard on the pier, my ankles screaming as I took off running. Behind me, the footsteps followed, but they were slower, heavier. These weren't runners, these were muscles. I kept moving until I reached the street, ducked into an alley, and leaned against a wall, my breath fogging the cold air. The rain soaked through my coat. My hat was gone, and the ledger was still tucked under my arm. I'd found something, all right. I'd found a thread that led straight to Barone, and maybe straight to Marchetti's killer. But I also found out one thing for sure. Someone didn't want me looking, and that someone was willing to kill to keep me quiet. I limped back to my car, lit a cigarette with shaking hands, and sat there in the dark. The rain kept falling, the city kept sleeping, and Arthur Marchetti's ghost kept whispering from the bottom of the bay. Tomorrow, I was going to have a talk with Patricia Vance. And maybe, if I was lucky, she'd live long enough to tell me the truth. Patricia Vance lived in a walk-up on the edge of Belltown, the kind of building where the landlord stopped fixing things around the time the war ended. The hallway smelled like boiled cabbage and regret. I climbed 3 flights of stairs, my ankles still smarting from the warehouse escape, and knocked on a door with paint peeling like old sunburn. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time, the kind of knock that says I'm not going anywhere. From inside, the sound of someone moving slowly. Hesitant, a chain rattled. The door cracked open an inch, and one eye appeared. Blue, bloodshot, scared. Patricia Vance? Who's asking? Name's Harry Nile, private investigator. I'm looking for Arthur Marchetti. The eye disappeared. The chain came off. The door opened enough for me to see the woman standing there, in a bathrobe that had seen better days, her dark hair tangled, her face pale as skim milk. "I already talked to the police," she said. "I don't know anything." "Police talked to you about Marchetti?" "Yesterday. A detective named Haggerty. He asked the same questions everyone's been asking." "Mind if I come in? I won't take long." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Make it quick." The apartment was small, cluttered, and smelled like stale cigarettes and cheap perfume. A suitcase sat open on the bed, half-packed. A stack of papers sat on the table, next to a half-empty bottle of something brown. "Are you packing for a trip, Miss Vance?" She sat down at the table, wrapped her arms around herself. "I was thinking about visiting my aunt in Portland. I needed to get out of Seattle for a while." "Running from something?" "I'm not running." She lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. I can't stay here, not after what happened. What happened to Arthur Marchetti? She looked at me like I'd asked the dumbest question in the world. He's dead, Mr. Nile. Somebody killed him. Now what makes you so sure of that? She laughed, a bitter sound, hollow and sharp. Because I saw him, the night he disappeared. I saw him get into a car with Leo Barone's men. The pieces clicked into place. You saw him in the warehouse? I work there, Mr. Nile. I see everything. Arthur was closing up and these two goons came in. Big guys, nice suits, bad intentions. They said Barone wanted to see him. Arthur tried to argue, but they weren't listening. They took him out the back door, shoved him into a black Cadillac and drove off. And you didn't report this? To who? The police? Haggerty's in Barone's pocket. Everyone knows it. If I'd opened my mouth, I'd be floating in the bay next to him. I sat down across from her, pulled out my own cigarette, and let the smoke curl between us. You know what this looks like, don't you? What? It looks like you had a motive. Your father, Silas Vance. He was killed 18 months ago. The official story was about mugging, but word on the street says Marchetti had something to do with it. Patricia's face went tight, her jaw clenched, and for a second I thought she was going to throw something. My father was murdered by Marchetti and Barone. I know it. They were running guns and stolen art together, and when my father found out, they silenced him, made it look like a robbery. So you went to work for Marchetti to find proof. I was going to bring him down. I spent a year and a half copying ledgers, memorizing names, keeping records of everything he did. She pointed to a folder on the table. It's all in there. Dates, shipments, payments to Barone. Enough to put both of them away for life. Then why didn't you go to the DA? Because I was stupid. Her voice cracked. I thought if I had enough evidence, I wouldn't need anyone else. But then Barone found out I was digging. He had Arthur killed to send me a message, and now Haggerty wants to pin it on me. Pin what on you? The murder. They found Arthur's body this morning, in a ditch up by Snoqualmie Pass, shot twice in the chest. I went cold. When did you hear that? Haggerty came by at 6 in the morning, took my statement, told me not to leave town. But I could see it in his eyes, Mr. Nile. He thinks I did it. The grieving secretary who was sleeping with her boss, who had a daddy she wanted to avenge. He's got his patsy lined up. She was shaking now, tears spilling down her cheeks. I sat there and let her cry for a minute. It was the most human thing I'd seen all week. Miss Vance, were you sleeping with Marchetti? She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. No, I was pretending to. I thought if he trusted me, I'd get closer to the truth. He wanted me to be his mistress. I let him think he was going to get what he wanted. I played the part. But I never. She broke off, took a shuddering breath. You have to believe me. I didn't kill him. I believed her. That was the problem. She was too obvious. The vengeful daughter, the spurned lover, the secretary with a suitcase half packed. It was a neat little package, tied with a bow, perfect for Haggerty to present to the DA. Too neat. Who knew about your father? Everyone. It wasn't a secret. Marchetti knew I blamed him. He hired me out of guilt, I think, or maybe he wanted to keep me close. And Barone knew. He tried to buy me off, offered me $10,000 to leave Seattle and forget the whole thing. I told him to go to hell. Smart move. It got my boss killed. I pushed back my chair and stood up. You stay put, Miss Vance. Don't pack. Don't run. If you run, you might as well sign your own confession. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. What are you going to do? I'm going to find out who really killed Arthur Marchetti, and then I'm going to have a conversation with Leo Barone that he's not going to enjoy. I left her there, trembling in her robe, clutching that folder like a life raft. I made it down the stairs and out into the rain before the phone booth caught my eye. The operator connected me to the precinct. Lieutenant Haggerty's desk, I said. A gruff voice answered. Haggerty. This is Harry Nile. I'm a private investigator working for Eleanor Marchetti. So you're the guy stirring up trouble. What do you want, Nile? I want to see the body. What body? The one you found this morning, Arthur Marchetti. I'm told he had a scar on his left hand, an old burn from the Navy. I want to confirm the ID. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear Haggerty breathing, slow and deliberate, like a man deciding whether to step on a cockroach or let it crawl away. The body's at the county morgue. You want to see it? Be my guest. But I'm warning you, Nile, stay out of my way on this one. I've got my suspect, and she's going down. We'll see about that. I hung up and caught a cab to the county morgue. The place smelled like formaldehyde and bad decisions. The attendant pulled open the drawer, and there he was, Arthur Marchetti. Broad-shouldered, dark hair gone gray at the temples, eyes closed like he was just taking a nap. I looked at his hands, left hand. There, just above the wrist, a puckered scar shaped like a half-moon, old burn, just like his wife said. I nodded to the attendant. That's him. Must have been a rough way to go. 2 shots, close range, no signs of a struggle. Any other injuries? The attendant checked his notes. Bruising on the knuckles. It looked like he threw a punch before he died, and there was a small amount of fiber on his suit jacket. Blue wool, maybe from a coat. Anything else? One more thing. We found a matchbook in his pocket. The Blue Parrot. You know the place. I knew it. Leo Barone's club. I walked out into the rain feeling like a blind man in a dark room. Patricia Vance didn't do this. Too clean, too convenient. She was a scapegoat, a loose end that someone wanted tied up. But if Barone had Marchetti killed, why leave his body where it could be found? Why not just dump him in the bay, like he'd done with Silas Vance? Unless there was another player in this game, someone with a different set of rules. Someone who wanted Barone's name pinned to the crime too. I thought about the folder in Patricia's apartment, the evidence she'd been gathering for 18 months. If someone knew about that folder, knew what it contained, they might want to silence Marchetti before he could talk, and frame the secretary at the same time. 2 birds, 1 stone. The rain was getting heavier, the streets were flooding, and somewhere out there, a killer was watching, waiting, thinking they'd gotten away with murder. I lit another cigarette, turned up my collar, and walked back into the night. The case was getting darker, and so was I. I spent the rest of the night in my office, surrounded by the kind of evidence that makes you wish you'd chosen a simpler line of work. Plumbing, maybe, or longshoreman. Anything that didn't involve dead bodies and beautiful women with secrets. The ledger was spread open on my desk, the cryptic numbers mocking me. The folder from Patricia Vance's apartment sat next to it, full of dates and names and figures that painted a picture of greed so deep it could swallow a city. And in the middle of it all, a single matchbook from the Blue Parrot. I'd been staring at it for an hour, turning it over in my fingers like it might confess if I squeezed hard enough. The rain had finally stopped, but the air was still thick with it, seeping through the window frame and making the papers curl at the edges. I lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and started going through everything again. Slower this time, looking for the thing that didn't belong. The matchbook was standard issue, blue cover with silver lettering, the kind you get by the box if you own a nightclub. But there was something about it that kept nagging at me, something I couldn't quite place. I held it up to the light. I turned it over, and then I saw it. On the inside flap, barely visible against the dark cardboard, there was a small pencil mark. Not a number, a word. Faint, smudged, like someone had written it in a hurry and then tried to rub it out. Eleanor. My blood went cold. I grabbed the phone and dialed the Marchetti residence. It rang 6 times before she picked up. Her voice was thick with sleep, but there was an edge underneath it. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. Mrs. Marchetti? It's Harry Nile. I need to ask you something. Mr. Nile? It's almost 2 in the morning. I know, this can't wait. The matchbook we found in your husband's pocket, it had your name written inside it. Someone wrote Eleanor on the flap. A long pause. I could hear her breathing, slow and measured, like she was choosing her next words carefully. I don't know what you're talking about. Arthur and I didn't go to the Blue Parrot. He never took me there. Then who did? How should I know? He had other women. Maybe one of them wrote my name to throw suspicion on me. Women do that, Mr. Nile. They get jealous. They get angry. They do terrible things. Like murder? I didn't kill my husband. Never say you did, but you're not telling me everything, are you? You said you confronted the mistress, Diane Cross, but you didn't tell me you'd met her at the Blue Parrot. Another pause, longer this time. I didn't meet her there. We met at a cafe on First Avenue. I don't know anything about a matchbook. Then why is your name on it? I told you, someone wrote it there. Someone who wants to make me look guilty. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been burning a hole in my mind since I'd seen the body. Mrs. Marchetti, were you wearing a blue wool coat when you came to my office? What does that have to do with anything? Answer the question. Yes, I was wearing a blue coat. It's cold in Seattle, Mr. Nile. I'm not dressed for summer. And where is that coat now? I threw it away. The sleeve got torn. Why are you asking me these questions? Because there was blue wool fiber on your husband's jacket. Because your perfume, gardenia, was on his collar. Because your name is on a matchbook from a club where he was last seen alive. Because every time I talk to you, I get the feeling you're reading from a script you wrote the night before. But I didn't say any of that. I just thanked her for her time and hung up. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't like. A wife who claimed she didn't know where her husband was, but whose perfume was on his body. A mistress who'd disappeared. A secretary with a folder full of evidence. A mob boss who took 45% of everything. And a matchbook with a name written in pencil. I grabbed my coat and headed back out into the night. The Maxwell Gallery was dark when I got there, but I'd expected that. What I hadn't expected was the light burning in the back room. I circled around the building, found a fire escape, and climbed. The window was locked, but there's not a lock made that can stop a man with a good reason and a bad attitude. I slipped inside, landed softly on a wooden floor, and found myself in a storage room full of paintings wrapped in canvas. Voices came from the front of the gallery, 2 of them. One male, one female. The woman was crying. He's dead. You told me he'd just leave, that they'd scare him and he'd leave. You didn't say anything about killing him. I crept closer, staying in the shadows. Through a crack in the door, I could see them. Diane Cross, young, blonde, pale as a ghost. And the man she was talking to was someone I hadn't expected to see. Lieutenant Haggerty. He turned, and the look on his face was one I'd seen on gamblers when they realize they've bet their last dollar on a losing hand. Nile, you just don't know when to quit. Neither do you, apparently. Framing a girl for murder while you cover up your own tracks. That's a new low even for you. Diane Cross looked between us, confused. You know each other. We've met. Haggerty here was the one who took your statement about Marchetti, wasn't he? Told you to keep quiet, to stay out of sight. She nodded, trembling. He said if I talked, I'd be next. He said Barone's men would find me and make sure I never saw daylight again. Barone's men. I turned to Haggerty. That's the angle you're working at. All the blame goes to Barone, and Patricia Vance goes to prison for a crime she didn't commit. Clean and simple. Haggerty's hand drifted toward his coat pocket. I knew what was in there. A service revolver, probably. The same one that had put 2 bullets in Arthur Marchetti's chest. You think you've got it all figured out, don't you, Nile? The brilliant detective, solving the case with nothing but a gut feeling and a smart mouth. I've got the ledger. I've got the fiber from Marchetti's coat. I've got a matchbook with Eleanor Marchetti's name on it. And I've got a witness who just heard you threaten her. I didn't threaten anyone. I was trying to keep her alive. By telling her to hide, by making sure she couldn't contradict your story. Haggerty's hand was still hovering near his coat. I met his eyes and held them. Here's how this goes, Lieutenant. You let me walk out of here with Miss Cross. You let me go to the DA with everything I've found. And maybe, if you cooperate, you get to spend your retirement in a minimum security prison instead of a federal penitentiary. I could just shoot you both and make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Nobody would ask questions. Nobody ever does. You could, but you won't. Because you're not a killer, Haggerty. You're just a dirty cop who got in over his head. There's a difference. The tension stretched between us like a wire about to snap. Then Haggerty's hand dropped. He let out a long breath, all the fight draining out of him. Barone had Marchetti killed. I just cleaned it up, made it look like a domestic dispute. The wife, the secretary, it doesn't matter who takes the fall as long as it's not Barone. Who killed Marchetti? One of Barone's men, a guy named Frankie Boyle. They found out Marchetti was cooperating with the feds. Had a deal to testify against Barone in exchange for immunity. That's why the ledger existed. He was keeping records for the prosecution. He had a scar on his left hand, Old Navy burn. That's how his wife identified him. Yeah, she saw the body before you did, recognized the scar and broke down. I believed her. I didn't know she'd been there before I got to the scene. Where was she when Boyle killed her husband? Haggerty shook his head. I don't know, but she was the one who called me, told me where to find the body. I felt the last piece click into place. Eleanor Marchetti had known all along. She'd found her husband's body, or she'd been there when it happened. And instead of calling the police, she'd called a corrupt cop she knew would help her cover it up. What did she have on you, Haggerty? She knew about a pension fund I'd been skimming, 5 years' worth. If it came out, I'd lose everything. So you helped her bury the truth, helped her frame her husband's own secretary. It was either that or go to prison. I grabbed Diane Cross by the arm and steered her toward the back door. You're going to the DA's office first thing in the morning. You're going to tell them everything. And Haggerty, I turned back to look at him. You're going to do the same thing, or I'll make sure the story about the pension fund ends up on every front page in Seattle. I led Diane out into the rain, and I didn't look back. The air was cold and clean. I took a deep breath, letting it wash away the stench of betrayal and corruption. The case was almost solved, but there was one more stop I had to make. Eleanor Marchetti had a lot of explaining to do, and I was going to make sure she did it in front of a judge. The sun was trying to break through the clouds when I got back to my office, but it didn't have the heart for it. Seattle in November doesn't have sunshine. It does gray, and more gray, and then a little rain to keep things interesting. I'd sent Diane Cross home with strict instructions to stay put and not talk to anyone. She was scared, but she was also smart. Smart enough to know that Haggerty's confession was her ticket out of this mess. But Haggerty's confession wasn't enough, not for a jury, not for the DA. I needed hard evidence. I needed to put Eleanor Marchetti at the scene, and I needed to do it before she had time to cover her tracks. I started with the phone company. The records took an hour to pull, but when they came through, I found what I was looking for. A call was placed from a payphone near the Snoqualmie Pass rest area at 11:47 p.m. on the night Arthur Marchetti died. The number dialed was Haggerty's personal line at the precinct. I called the exchange. Who placed that call? The operator was tired, bored, and not impressed by my badge. The records show a coin payment, no name. Any chance you've got the location of the caller? It's a payphone, mister, no ID. But I had something better. Across the street from that payphone, there was a gas station. An old man named Harlow ran the place, and he had a memory for faces. I drove out there, found him pumping gas, and showed him the photograph Eleanor Marchetti had given me of herself and her husband. Did you see this woman around here last Thursday night? Harlow squinted, wiped his hands on his coveralls, and took his time studying the picture. Yeah, I remember her. Pretty thing, all dressed up. Came in here about midnight, asked to use the phone, said her car had broken down, but I didn't see any car. What was she wearing? Blue coat, fancy, like something out of a magazine. I felt the pieces click together. Did you see her leave? She walked up the road toward the rest area. Didn't come back. Figured someone picked her up. I thanked him, slipped him a $5, and got back in my car. Eleanor Marchetti had been at the scene. She'd called Haggerty from a payphone near where her husband's body was found. She'd been wearing the blue coat that left fibers on his jacket, and she'd lied to me about every single part of it. But the phone call only put her at the scene after the murder. I needed to prove she was there when it happened. I drove back to the city and started working the docks. The night watchman at Pier 47 was a man named Gus Kowalski, a veteran of the First War and a man who didn't miss much. Thursday night? Gus scratched his chin. Yeah, I remember. There was a woman hanging around the warehouse. Fancy lady, blue coat. She was arguing with some fella near the loading dock. You see who she was arguing with? Couldn't see his face. He was in the shadows. But I heard her say something like, I know what you did to him. Then she walked away, got into a cab, and headed north. You get the cab company? Sure did. Called them for her. It was yellow cab, number 47. The driver's name was Eddie. Good kid. I found Eddie at the cab stand near the ferry terminal. He was young, maybe 25, with a tired face and a pack of Lucky Strikes rolled up in his sleeve. The lady in the blue coat, I said. You picked her up at Pier 47 on Thursday night. Where'd you take her? Eddie blew smoke out the window. She told me to follow a black Cadillac, said to keep my distance, not get too close. I followed that car all the way out to Snoqualmie Pass. What time was that? About 10:30. Maybe 11. The Cadillac pulled off the main road, down this dirt track. The lady told me to stop. She got out, paid me double the fare, and told me to wait. Did she come back? After about half an hour. She looked different, pale, shaking. She got back in the cab and said, "Take me to the nearest payphone." I dropped her at a gas station about 5 miles back. That was it. The timeline. The one piece that Eleanor Marchetti had been counting on me not to find. I drove to her house. The sun was going down, and the clouds were rolling in, bringing another round of rain. I knocked on the door, and she answered in a silk robe, her hair perfect, her face composed, but her eyes gave her away. She knew why I was there. "Mr. Nile, this is an unexpected visit." "I'm sure it is. May I come in?" She stepped aside. I walked into the living room and took my time looking around. The expensive furniture, the tasteful art, the whole place stank of money that had been paid for with blood. "I found your cab driver," I said, turning to face her. "Eddie. Yellow cab, number 47. He remembers you very well, Mrs. Marchetti. The blue coat, the double fare, the trip to Snoqualmie Pass." She didn't flinch. That surprised me. But then again, Eleanor Marchetti was a woman who'd been playing this game for a long time. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You followed your husband to the warehouse. You saw Frankie Boyle put him in a black Cadillac. You followed that Cadillac all the way to Snoqualmie Pass, where you watched them kill him. Then you called Haggerty from a payphone and made sure he'd clean up the mess. You can't prove any of that. Gus Kowalski saw you at the warehouse. Harlow, the gas station attendant, saw you at the payphone. Eddie, the cab driver, took you to the scene and back. And the fiber from your coat is still on your husband's jacket, waiting to be matched by the lab." I watched the color drain from her face. The mask was starting to crack. "Why did you hire me, Mrs. Marchetti? If you already knew your husband was dead, why go through the charade?" She walked to the window, her back to me. When she spoke, her voice was distant, hollow. "Because I needed an alibi. I needed someone to witness that I was looking for Arthur, that I didn't know what happened to him. You were the last person to see me before the truth came out. You were supposed to be my proof that I was just a worried wife. And the mistress? Diane Cross was at a loose end. I wanted Barone to think she'd killed Arthur. I wanted all of it to point away from me. But it didn't work, did it? Because you underestimated one thing." "What's that?" "Your own perfume." I stepped closer. "Gardenia. The same scent that was on your husband's collar. The same scent I smelled on you the day you walked into my office." She turned, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. Not the fear of being caught, the fear of being judged. "I didn't kill him," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I loved him. Despite everything, I loved him. But you let him die." I tried to stop it. She sank onto the couch, her hands trembling. "I went to the warehouse to warn him. I knew Barone was going to have him killed. I told Arthur to run, to leave the country, but he wouldn't listen. He said he had a deal with the feds, that he could put Barone away and start over. He was so sure of himself." "When did Frankie Boyle show up?" "While we were arguing. He came out of the shadows, said Barone wanted to see Arthur. Arthur went without a fight. I think he knew what was coming." She looked up at me, her eyes wet. "I followed them. I don't know why. I had to see it. I had to know if he died with dignity." "And did he?" "He fought. He always fought. Frankie had a gun, but Arthur went for him anyway. Hit him, knocked him down, but Frankie was faster. He fired twice, and Arthur just fell." She was crying now, the tears cutting tracks through her perfect makeup. "And you called Haggerty," I said. "I called Haggerty because he was the only one who'd believe me, the only one who'd cover it up. I knew if the truth came out, Barone would come after me. I knew I'd be next." "So you let him frame an innocent woman?" She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know what I did was wrong, but I was scared, and I was angry. Arthur chose his business over me, over everything. I wanted him to pay. I just didn't want him to die." I sat down across from her and lit a cigarette. The smoke curled between us, a thin barrier between truth and confession. "Here's what's going to happen, Mrs. Marchetti. You're going to come with me to the DA's office. You're going to tell them everything. Haggerty, Barone, Frankie Boyle, all of it. And then you're going to let the chips fall where they may. And if I refuse, then I walk out that door and I take my evidence to the papers. Your name on the front page, the perfect wife, the grieving widow, the woman who let her husband die and framed an innocent girl for his murder. You'll be a pariah, Eleanor, and Barone will find you before the trial even starts." She sat there for a long moment, staring at the floor. The rain had started again, tapping against the windows like it was asking to be let in. "Okay," she said finally, "I'll do it. But you have to promise me something." "What's that?" "Promise me you'll find Frankie Boyle. Promise me he'll pay for what he did." I put out my cigarette and stood up. "I don't make promises I can't keep, Mrs. Marchetti, but I'll tell you this much, I'm going to find him. And when I do, he's going to answer for Arthur Marchetti's murder, one way or another." She nodded, and I helped her to her feet. The timeline had been rebuilt. The gap had been filled, and now the only thing left was to bring the whole rotten house of cards crashing down. We walked out into the rain together. She was still wearing that blue coat, the same one that had left its mark on her dead husband's jacket. Some things, I thought, just can't be washed away. Eleanor Marchetti spent the night in a holding cell at the county jail. I'd made the call to the DA myself, and by the time the sun came up, she'd signed a full confession and agreed to testify against Leo Barone and Frankie Boyle. The DA was ecstatic. Haggerty was already in an interrogation room, singing like a canary in exchange for a deal. But something still nagged at me. The way Patricia Vance had looked at me when she'd talked about her father. The way she'd said I was going to bring him down with such quiet certainty. The way she'd been packing that suitcase, ready to run, even though she claimed she was innocent. I went back to her apartment, but she was gone. The place was clean. No suitcase, no folder of evidence, no sign she'd ever been there at all. The super let me in with a grumble and a warning. "She left early this morning. Some fella picked her up in a black sedan. Didn't get a look at his face." "Did she say where she was going?" "Nah, but she looked scared, like someone was after her." I lit a cigarette and stood in the middle of her empty apartment, letting the smoke curl around me. Patricia Vance was running, but from who? Haggerty was already in custody. Eleanor was locked up. Barone hadn't been taken in yet, but his days were numbered, unless Barone had gotten to her first. I headed to the Maxwell Gallery. Diane Cross was there, pale and jumpy, but she let me in. "Have you heard from Patricia?" I asked. "No. I called her last night, but her line was busy. Tried again this morning, no answer." "She's gone. Someone picked her up." Diane's face went white. "Oh God, it's Barone, isn't it? He found out she was gathering evidence against him. Maybe. Or maybe she's got her own reasons for disappearing. I need to know more about her, Diane. The real her, not the secretary, not the grieving daughter, the woman behind the mask." Diane sat down, her hands trembling. "She didn't tell me everything, but she told me some things, about her father, about the war." "Keep talking." "Her father, Silas Vance. He wasn't just an importer. He ran guns during the war. Rifles, ammunition, explosives. He sold them to both sides. Marchetti was his partner in that. But when the war ended, the government started looking into war profiteers. Vance got scared. He wanted to disappear. So Marchetti killed him." "No." Diane shook her head. "That's the part Patricia didn't want to believe. Silas Vance committed suicide. He left a note, confessing to everything. But Marchetti and Barone found the note and decided to cover it up. They didn't want the investigation to shine a light on their operation." "Where is that note now?" Diane swallowed hard. "Patricia has it. She found it when she was going through her father's things after he died. She kept it secret all these years. That's why she went to work for Marchetti. Not for revenge, for the truth." I felt the ground shift beneath me. If Patricia had that note, she had the key to everything, and she was out there somewhere, running from people who'd kill to keep it hidden. "What else did she tell you?" "She said there was a man, a soldier who worked for her father during the war. He was the one who actually ran the shipments. After Vance died, the soldier disappeared. No one knows where he went." "Name?" "Frankie Boyle." The cigarette burned down to my fingers. I dropped it and crushed it with my heel. Frankie Boyle was Vance's man. Before he worked for Barone, he was loyal to Silas Vance. When Vance died, Boyle blamed Marchetti. That's why he started working for Barone, to get close to the people who destroyed his boss. "So Boyle didn't kill Arthur Marchetti for Barone," I said slowly. "He killed Marchetti for himself, for revenge." Diane nodded, And if Patricia has the note, she's the only person who can prove it. I was already heading for the door. If anyone calls asking about me, you don't know where I am. And Diane locked the door behind me. The rain was coming down again, heavy and thick, the kind that turns the streets to rivers and makes you forget the sun ever existed. I stood on the sidewalk and tried to think like Patricia Vance. Where would she go? Who would she trust? Mickey Coletti at the Rusty Nail. She'd mentioned him once, in passing, said he'd known her father. If anyone knew where she'd run, it would be him. The bar was nearly empty at this hour, just a couple of old-timers nursing beers and a waitress wiping down tables. Mickey saw me come in and his face went tight. I figured you'd show up, he said. You know where she is? She came to me last night, scared out of her wits, said someone had been following her for days. A man in a black sedan. Frankie Boyle. Could be. She said he'd been watching her apartment, waiting for the right moment. She got out just in time. Where is she, Mickey? He looked at me for a long moment, weighing something behind his eyes. Trust, maybe, or fear. I can't tell you. She made me promise. Mickey, people are dead. More people are going to die if I don't find her. Arthur Marchetti was a rat, Harry. He was going to sell everyone out to save his own skin. His wife knew it. His mistress knew it. Even Barone knew it. The only person who didn't know it was Patricia. Then why did Boyle kill him? Because Boyle was loyal to Silas Vance. He saw Marchetti as a traitor, a man who'd let his partner take the fall while he walked away clean. That note proves it. Silas Vance's suicide note confesses to everything, the gun running, the bribes, the whole rotten operation. Marchetti and Barone covered it up, but Boyle found out about it, and he's been waiting ever since. I sat down on a stool, my legs suddenly heavy. So Boyle killed Marchetti to avenge Vance. And Patricia has the note that could put Boyle away for life, or give him the alibi he needs if he can spin it as revenge for a dead partner. Mickey nodded. She's in danger, Harry. That's why I told her to run. Where did she go? He sighed and reached under the bar, pulling out a scrap of paper. She said if you came looking, to give you this, but you didn't hear it from me. I took the paper, an address, uptown, near the university. A boarding house for women. She's staying with a friend from the war years, Mickey said. Someone her father used to help. She's safe for now, but Boyle won't stop until he finds her. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. Then I'd better get there first. Harry, one more thing. What? Boyle isn't the only one looking for her. Barone put a price on her head yesterday. $10,000 to anyone who brings her in alive. Alive? Alive. She's worth more to him breathing. She knows too much about his operation. He wants to control what she says and when she says it. I stood up and buttoned my coat. Then I guess I'll just have to make sure she doesn't get caught. The boarding house was old and creaky, full of the kind of women who'd seen too much life and not enough kindness. The landlady pointed me to a room on the 3rd floor. I climbed the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the silent hallway. I knocked twice. Patricia opened the door, her face pale and her eyes red. But when she saw it was me, something flickered behind her fear. Relief, maybe. You found me, she said. I found you, and I need to ask you something. She let me in. The room was small, a single bed and a worn armchair. A window looked out onto the rain-slicked street. I know about the note, I said. Your father's suicide note. I know he wasn't murdered. I know Marchetti and Barone covered it up. And I know Frankie Boyle killed Arthur Marchetti out of loyalty to your father. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped in her lap. Yes, all of that is true. Where is the note? She hesitated. Then she reached under the mattress and pulled out a manila envelope, worn and yellowed. I've had it for 3 years. I was going to burn it a dozen times, but I couldn't. It was the only thing I had left of him. Can I see it? She handed it to me. I opened it carefully, my fingers brushing against the old paper. The handwriting was shaky, almost illegible, but the words were clear enough. I, Silas Vance, being of sound mind and body, confessed to the following crimes. The list went on. Dates, shipments, payments to police, bribes to officials. It was all there, the whole ugly truth. And at the bottom, a line that made my blood run cold. In January of this year, Arthur Marchetti told me he intended to cooperate with federal authorities. He threatened to expose me if I didn't agree to his terms. I saw no way out. I choose to end my own life rather than live as a traitor to the people who trusted me. I looked at Patricia. Your father killed himself because Marchetti was going to turn him in. He was a broken man. He'd lost everything, his reputation, his business, his self-respect. And Arthur, the man he'd trusted most, was going to destroy what little was left. He couldn't face it. So Boyle killed Marchetti because he blamed him for your father's death. Frankie was devoted to my father. He saw Arthur's betrayal as the worst kind of sin. He waited 3 years for his chance. I folded the note and put it back in the envelope. This changes everything. Does it? Frankie Boyle isn't just a hired gun. He's a vigilante, a man who believes he was serving justice. That gives him a different kind of motive. And that kind of motive makes him dangerous in a way that money and fear never could. Patricia looked at me, her eyes searching mine. What are you going to do? I'm going to find Frankie Boyle. I'm going to make him answer for Arthur Marchetti's murder. And I'm going to make sure you're safe, Patricia. She smiled then, a sad, thin smile. No one's been safe since my father died, but I think maybe now, with you, I might have a chance. I didn't answer. I just stood there, watching the rain streak down the window, thinking about all the lives that had been tangled up in this case. The greed, the betrayal, the secrets, and the one secret that had started it all. The truth that had been buried under 3 years of lies and cover-ups. The truth that had killed Arthur Marchetti. I left Patricia at the boarding house with strict instructions to stay put and not open the door for anyone but me. She didn't argue. She looked tired, hollowed out, like she'd been carrying the weight of her father's secrets for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. The rain had let up, but the sky was still the color of old ash. I walked back to my car and sat there for a minute, letting the silence settle around me. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones, the way you feel a storm coming before you see the clouds. The case was solved. The murderer was identified. The motive was clear. And yet there was a splinter in my mind, a detail that didn't fit, buried somewhere in the mess of information I'd collected over the past few days. I lit a cigarette and started going through it all again, piece by piece. The matchbook from the Blue Parrot. Eleanor's name written on the inside flap. She denied writing it, said she'd never been to the club. The blue wool fiber, from the coat she admitted she'd thrown away. She'd been at the scene, all right. That much was proven. The gardenia perfume on Marchetti's collar. She wore gardenia. She admitted that too. The cab driver, the gas station attendant, the night watchman. All of them placed her at the scene, before and after the murder. It was solid, airtight. A jury would convict her on that evidence alone. And yet, the splinter, the detail that didn't fit. I thought about Patricia Vance. She'd said she was gathering evidence against Marchetti for 18 months. She'd kept a folder full of documents. She'd been careful, methodical, and patient. And then she'd packed a suitcase and tried to run. Why would she run if she was innocent? If she had the note, the suicide note that proved her father's death wasn't murder, why would she need to run from anything? Because Boyle was after her. That was the answer I'd accepted. But now I wasn't so sure. I thought about Frankie Boyle, a man who'd been loyal to Silas Vance, a man who'd waited 3 years for revenge, a man who'd killed Arthur Marchetti with 2 shots to the chest. But if Boyle had killed Marchetti, why hadn't he taken the suicide note? The note that proved Vance's death was a suicide, not a murder. If Boyle was seeking revenge, the note would have been proof that Marchetti drove Vance to kill himself. It would have justified everything Boyle did, unless Boyle didn't know about the note, unless Patricia had never told him, or unless Patricia was the one who'd killed Marchetti. The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. I sat there, cigarette burning down to nothing, and let it play out in my mind. Patricia Vance had a motive, her father's death, the lies Marchetti had told, the betrayal of everything her family had built. Patricia Vance had an opportunity. She worked for Marchetti. She had access to his office, his schedule, his movements. Patricia Vance had the means. She'd said she was gathering evidence. She'd been close to Marchetti for 18 months. She could have gotten a gun from anywhere, and she had the note. The suicide note that proved Marchetti had driven her father to kill himself. But she also had an alibi. She said she was home the night Marchetti died. She said Boyle's men took him. What if she'd been lying about that too? I started the car and drove back to the precinct. Haggerty was in an interrogation room, looking like a man who'd seen the end of his career and wasn't happy about it. I sat down across from him and didn't bother with pleasantries. "Tell me about Patricia Vance," I said. "What about her? She was your prime suspect before Eleanor Marchetti confessed. Why?" Haggerty laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "Because she was the most obvious choice. The secretary with the dead father, the fake affair, the folder full of evidence. It was too perfect. I knew she was clean the moment I looked at her." "Then why were you going to charge her?" "Because my bosses wanted a conviction. They didn't care who, as long as it wasn't Barone. Barone paid them too much to let him go down for this. So Patricia was a scapegoat. She was a convenience. I had evidence, circumstantial, but enough to make it stick. The blue fiber, the matchbook, the fact that she'd been sleeping with Marchetti. It would have been an open and shut case." I leaned forward. "Matchbook? What matchbook?" Haggerty looked confused. "The one from the Blue Parrot. It had Patricia's handwriting in it. She'd written Eleanor on the flap, trying to throw suspicion on the wife." I felt the world tilt. Patricia's handwriting. Yeah, that was the clincher for me. The wife's name in the suspect's handwriting. It doesn't get much cleaner than that. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "You're telling me Patricia Vance wrote Eleanor's name on that matchbook?" "That's what the lab said." "Why didn't you mention this before?" "Because you never asked, and because I figured you already knew. You're the detective, right?" I was out the door before he could finish his sentence. The detail that wouldn't die, the matchbook with Eleanor's name on it. Patricia's handwriting, not Eleanor's, which meant Patricia had been setting up Eleanor from the beginning. She'd planted the matchbook on Marchetti's body, knowing it would point the finger at his wife. She'd made sure the evidence lined up just right. But why? If Patricia was the killer, why frame Eleanor? Why not just walk away clean? Because Eleanor knew something. Something that could have exposed Patricia's real plan. I drove back to the boarding house, my mind racing. Patricia had been one step ahead of me the whole time. She'd played the grieving daughter, the terrified witness, the woman with nothing left to lose. She'd let me think I was saving her. But she was the one who'd been in control all along. The boarding house was dark when I arrived. I climbed the stairs to her room and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder, nothing. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open and found the room empty. The bed was made. The window was open, letting in the cold night air and the sound of the city below. She was gone. On the small table by the window, there was a piece of paper with my name on it. I unfolded it, my hands steady despite the dread pooling in my stomach. "Mr. Nile, thank you for your help. You gave me everything I needed. You got Eleanor to confess. You got Haggerty to talk. You led me to Frankie Boyle's location. You think you were protecting me, but you were clearing the path. I'm going to finish what I started. Don't try to find me. You won't succeed, P." I read it twice, the words burning into my brain. She'd used me. She'd played me like a violin, getting me to do all the heavy lifting while she watched from the shadows. And now she was going after Frankie Boyle. I grabbed my coat and ran. The rusty nail was still open, and Mickey was wiping the bar when I burst in. "Mickey, where does Boyle stay?" Mickey looked up, his face pale. "Why?" "Because Patricia Vance is on her way to kill him, and she's got 3 years of rage behind her." Mickey put down the glass. "Boyle has a place out on the waterfront, old boathouse near Pier 52. He's been hiding out since Marchetti's body was found. Can you take me there? I can get you close, but if she's already there, then we'll be late. Let's go." We drove through the rain, the streets slick and empty. The boathouse was a decrepit structure, half collapsed, its windows dark. I got out and approached slowly, my hand on the revolver I'd started carrying. The door was ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The place smelled like rot and salt water. In the center of the room, Frankie Boyle sat in a wooden chair, his hands tied behind his back. He was alive, but just barely. A bruise the size of a dinner plate was forming on his cheek, and standing over him, a gun in her hand, was Patricia. "Don't try to stop me," she said quietly. "You don't know what he did. I know he killed Arthur Marchetti. I know he did it for your father. He didn't do it for my father. He did it for himself. He was the one who told Arthur that my dad was going to turn him in. He set the whole thing in motion. He wanted them to destroy each other." Boyle made a choking sound. "She's lying. She's telling the truth," Patricia said. and her voice was cold, empty of the fear she'd shown before. Frankie was the one who told Marchetti about my father's deal with the feds. He wanted Marchetti to turn my father in. He wanted the whole business to collapse so he could pick up the pieces. That's not what happened. Enough. I've been waiting for this moment for 3 years. I've been patient. I've been careful. I've been everything my father would have wanted. And now it's over. She raised the gun. I stepped forward, my own revolver trained on her. Put it down, Patricia. This isn't the way. It's the only way. He killed my father. He killed Arthur. And now he's going to pay. Your father killed himself. He wrote a note. It was in his own hand. You know that. I know Marchetti drove him to it. And I know Frankie made sure it happened. They both deserved to die. I held her eyes, steady as I could. You kill him now, and you'll never get out of this room. I'll put you down myself if I have to. And you're better than that, Patricia. You were gathering evidence for 18 months. You were going to do this legally. What happened to that? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I got tired. I got tired of waiting. I wanted it done. I wanted to see the fear in his eyes. Then let me do this right. I'll take him in. The note will prove everything. He'll go to prison for Marchetti's murder. Eleanor will testify. Haggerty will testify. He'll rot for years. That's worse than a bullet, Patricia. That's justice. The gun wavered. For a moment I thought she'd lower it. Then Frankie Boyle lunged forward, his hands still tied but his body a weapon. He hit Patricia hard, and the gun skittered across the floor. I moved fast, tackled Boyle, and brought him down with a knee to his back. Patricia was on her knees, gasping. Her shirt was torn, a cut on her cheek oozing blood. She looked up at me, her eyes empty. Are you going to kill me now? I holstered my revolver. No, I'm going to take you home. I pulled her to her feet, helped her to the door, and led her out into the rain. The case was over. The truth was out. And Patricia Vance, the woman I'd trusted, the woman I'd tried to save, was finally free. But I wasn't sure she'd ever be free of what she'd almost done. Some secrets, I thought, just can't stay buried. Dawn broke over Seattle like a bad hangover. Gray, throbbing, and full of regret. I'd spent the night on a lumpy couch in Murphy's apartment, watching Patricia Vance sleep in the spare room. She'd crashed hard after the boathouse, the adrenaline finally burning out and leaving nothing but exhaustion in its wake. Murphy had made coffee. Strong, black, the kind that could strip paint. She sat across from me at her kitchen table, her eyes sharp despite the early hour. You're going after Barone, she said. It wasn't a question. He's the one who started all this. He's the reason Silas Vance is dead, the reason Marchetti is dead, the reason Patricia almost became a killer. He doesn't get to walk away. How are you going to get him? I pulled out the suicide note. Silas Vance's confession, yellowed and fragile. I've got this. It's the only copy. Barone doesn't know Patricia has it. He thinks it was destroyed years ago. So you're going to use it as bait? Exactly. I call Barone, tell him I've got the note and I'm willing to sell it. He'll come running. He can't afford to let that kind of evidence float around. Murphy shook her head. He'll kill you, Harry. He'll take the note and put a bullet in your head before you can blink. Not if I set it up right. I'll have the DA's men staked out, close enough to move in but far enough to stay hidden. Barone shows up. I make the exchange, and when he takes the note, they pounce. And if he doesn't take the bait, then I'm out a phone call and a little bit of pride. Murphy looked at me for a long moment, then reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Just be careful, Harry. I don't want to identify your body. I'll be careful. I always am. You're not, but I love you anyway. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and headed for the door. Patricia was awake, standing in the doorway of the spare room, her face pale but steady. Where are you going? She asked. To finish this. You stay here with Murphy. Don't leave. Don't answer the phone. Don't open the door for anyone but me. She nodded, her eyes searching mine. What if you don't come back? Then Murphy knows a good PI who can take over your case. It was a lousy joke, but it made her smile. That was something. The Blue Parrot was a different place in the daylight. The neon sign was off, the windows dark, the whole building looking like a tired old man who'd spent too many nights drinking. I found a payphone across the street and dropped in a nickel. The number rang 3 times before a voice answered. Blue Parrot, we're closed. This is Harry Nile. I need to speak to Leo Barone. Mr. Barone isn't taking calls. Tell him I've got Silas Vance's suicide note, the original. I'm willing to sell it. A pause. The voice on the other end was more cautious now. Hold on. I waited. The rain had started again, a fine mist that clung to my coat and made the phone slick in my hand. After about 2 minutes, a new voice came on the line. Deeper, smoother, a voice that had been practiced in the art of intimidation. This is Barone. Who am I speaking to? Harry Nile. Private investigator. I've got a piece of paper that could put you away for a long time, Mr. Barone. I know who you are. I've got a file on you, Nile. You're a pain in the ass, but you're not stupid. What do you want? $50,000. Cash. That's what the note is worth. 50,000. You're out of your mind. You know what that note says. It names you. It is named Marchetti. It names every cop and official you've been paying off for the last 5 years. If it goes to the DA, you're finished. 50,000 is cheap compared to what you'll lose. There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing, weighing his options. Where and when? Tonight. The warehouse on Pier 47. Midnight. Come alone or the deal's off. Pier 47. That's Marchetti's old place. Coincidence. It's also neutral ground. No one goes there at night. I'll be there. But if you try to screw me, Nile, I'll make sure you regret it. I don't doubt it. He hung up. I hung up. My hands were shaking just a little, but I forced them still. Now for the hard part. I needed backup, and I couldn't use Haggerty's men. They were compromised, corrupt. The only clean cops in this town were the ones Barone hadn't gotten to yet. I drove to the federal building and walked into the office of the U.S. Attorney. The secretary gave me a skeptical look, but I flashed my license and told her I had information about a pending racketeering case. That got me through the door. The man behind the desk was young, sharp, and ambitious. His name was James Crawford, and he'd been looking for a way to bring down Barone for 6 months. You've got something, he said, leaning forward. I've got Silas Vance's suicide note. It's a confession. Names every official Barone bribed. And I've got a meeting with Barone tonight at midnight. I'm selling him the note. You're what? Relax. I'm not actually selling it. I'm baiting him. He'll show up, and when he does, your men can arrest him. Conspiracy to destroy evidence. Bribery. Racketeering. That's enough to hold him while you dig up the rest. Crawford studied me, his eyes narrowing. You'd risk your life for this? I'd risk my life for a good cup of coffee. This is just a bonus. He laughed, a genuine sound that seemed out of place in his sterile office. All right, Nile, I'll have 6 men positioned around the warehouse. We'll wire you for sound. When you give the signal, we move. What's the signal? Say the rain's getting worse. That'll be our cue. I can do that. We spent the afternoon going over the plan. The wire was small, barely visible under my shirt. The receiver was hidden in a briefcase that would be waiting for me at the warehouse. I felt like a singer at the opera, ready to step onto a stage I didn't want to be on. The hours crawled by. I went back to Murphy's, checked on Patricia, and tried to eat something. The food tasted like cardboard, but I forced it down. At 11, I headed out. The warehouse on Pier 47 was darker than I remembered. The rain had picked up, coming down in sheets that made the whole world blurry. I walked through the loading bay, my footsteps echoing on the concrete, and took my position near the desk where I'd found the ledger weeks ago. The briefcase was there, exactly where Crawford said it would be. Inside was a recorder, already running. I set the volume low and waited. At 12:15, I heard footsteps. Not one set, 3. Barone hadn't come alone. He stepped into the light, a big man in an expensive coat, flanked by 2 goons who looked like they'd been carved from granite. He smiled when he saw me, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Nile, you're punctual. I like that. Where's the money? He held up a leather satchel. 50,000, all there. Now show me the note. I pulled the envelope from my pocket, holding it just out of reach. Let's see the cash first. He opened the satchel. Stacks of bills, crisp and new. He was serious. This wasn't a bluff. Satisfied, I held out the envelope. He reached for it, his eyes gleaming. I let him take it. He opened it, read the first few lines, and then his face turned dark. "This is a copy. It's the original. I wouldn't bring the only copy to a meeting with a man who's killed people for less." His eyes flashed. "You're playing games with me. I'm doing what I have to do, Mr. Baron. That note is already in the hands of the U.S. Attorney. It doesn't matter if you take that one. There are a dozen more just like it in a safe downtown. Then why did you come here? To see the look on your face when you realized you'd lost." He lunged for me, but I was faster. My revolver was out, aimed at his chest. His goons tensed, hands going to their coats. "Don't," I said. "The first one to move gets a hole in something important." Baron's smile came back, colder than before. "You think you've won? You're one man in a warehouse full of shadows. My men could kill you before your finger twitches." "The rain's getting worse," I said. Baron laughed. "What kind of last words are those?" The lights came on. The doors burst open. 6 men in dark suits poured in, guns drawn, badges flashing. Crawford was in the lead, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Leo Baron, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, bribery, racketeering, and obstruction of justice." Baron's face went pale. His hands came up slowly, the satchel falling to the floor with a heavy thud. "This isn't over, Nile. You hear me? This isn't over. It's over for you," I said. "Take him away." The Fed men cuffed him and his goons, leading them out into the rain. Crawford paused at the door, giving me a nod. "You did good, Nile. We'll take it from here." I watched them go, the rain washing away the last traces of Baron's operation. The warehouse was empty now, just me and the sound of water hitting the roof. I lit a cigarette, the smoke curling up in the cold air. The case was over, the truth was out, and Leo Baron was finally going to pay for the lives he'd destroyed. But as I walked out into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was no real end to this kind of work. Men like Baron had a way of being replaced by other men, just as rotten, just as greedy. The game never really ended. I walked back to my car, the rain soaking through my coat, and drove home to Murphy's. Patricia was waiting by the window. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Peace, or something close to it. "It's done," I said. She nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Nile. Don't thank me. Just promise me you'll try to live a normal life. Do something that doesn't involve dead bodies and secret notes." "I'll try." I smiled, tipped my hat, and walked out into the rain. The city was still there, dark and wet and full of secrets, but for tonight at least, I'd made a small dent in the darkness, and in this line of work, that was enough. The DA's office was a monument to bureaucracy. High ceilings, polished wood, the kind of furniture that cost more than most people made in a year. I'd been here before, on the other side of the table, sweating under the lights while some prosecutor tried to squeeze a confession out of me. This time, I was the one doing the squeezing. James Crawford sat behind his desk, looking like a man who'd just won the lottery. The arrest of Leo Baron had made the morning papers, and the U.S. Attorney's Office was basking in the glow of a major victory. But Crawford knew as well as I did that the real battle was just beginning. "You're sure about this?" he asked, gesturing to the folder on his desk. "Is the evidence solid?" "Solid enough to put Baron away for a long time. The suicide note names him directly. The ledger from Marchetti's warehouse shows the payments. The cab driver's testimony puts Eleanor at the scene. And we've got Haggerty singing like a canary." Crawford nodded, flipping through the pages. "And Patricia Vance, what happened to her?" I've been dreading this question. Patricia had done wrong. That was undeniable. She'd manipulated me. She'd tried to kill Frankie Boyle. She'd planted false evidence to frame Eleanor. But she wasn't a killer. Not really. She was a woman driven to the edge by grief and a hunger for justice that had curdled into something darker. "She's a witness," I said carefully. "She's also the victim of a conspiracy to silence her father's memory. I think, given the circumstances, the DA might be willing to cut her a deal. She tampered with evidence. She preserved evidence. The suicide note, the original, was in her possession for 3 years. She kept it safe. She made sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands. That's more than anyone else did." Crawford leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You've got a soft spot for her, don't you?" "I've got a soft spot for anyone who's been chewed up by this city and spit out. That's not a crime, is it?" "Depends on how far you're willing to go to protect her." I'm not protecting her. I'm telling you the truth. She made mistakes. Some of them were serious. But she's not the one who killed Arthur Marchetti. She's not the one who ran guns during the war. She's not the one who covered up a suicide to protect a racketeering operation. Frankie Boyle is the trigger man. Leo Barone is the architect. And Haggerty is the man who kept the whole rotten machine running. Crawford was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for his pen and made a note in the file. Okay, I'll talk to the DA, see if we can work something out. But I'm not making any promises. I don't need promises. I just need a fair shake. Fair doesn't exist in this town, Nile. You should know that by now. I stood up, buttoned my coat, and headed for the door. But I paused with my hand on the knob. One more thing. Frankie Boyle, where is he? The holding cell at the county jail. He's been charged with the murder of Arthur Marchetti. We're processing him now. Don't let him out on bail. He's got resources, friends, people who owe him favors. He's not going anywhere. He's the only one who can corroborate Patricia's testimony against Barone. We need him alive. Just keep him alive, I said. That's all I ask. I walked out of the office and into the rain. The sky was gray, the streets wet, the whole city looking like it had been painted in shades of sorrow. Seattle in November does that to a man. Makes him wonder why he bothers getting out of bed. I caught a cab to the county jail and asked to see Frankie Boyle. The guard looked at me like I'd asked to see the president, but after a few phone calls I was led to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. Boyle was already there, his hands cuffed to a metal ring on the floor. The bruise on his cheek had darkened to a deep purple, and his eyes were sunken, hollow. He looked like a man who'd seen the end of his life and wasn't sure if he cared anymore. Nile, come to gloat? I came to ask you a question. I've already talked to the feds. They've got everything they need. Not from you, from me. I want to know why you did it. He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Why did I kill Marchetti? Because he was a rat, a liar, a man who destroyed everyone who trusted him. He destroyed Silas Vance. He destroyed his own wife. He destroyed his own business. He deserved what he got. And Patricia? What did she do to deserve being used? His eyes flickered, just for a moment. Patricia was a tool. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know the full story. Then tell me the full story. Tell me what really happened. Boyle leaned back, his gaze distant. Silas Vance was a good man. He was loyal. He was honest. And Marchetti used him. He took advantage of Silas's trust and used it to build his own empire. When Silas found out what Marchetti was doing, he threatened to go to the authorities. Marchetti got to him first. Told him he'd make sure Silas spent the rest of his life in prison. Told him he'd destroy his daughter's future. Made him believe there was no way out. So Silas killed himself. He didn't have a choice. Marchetti gave him a gun and told him it was the only way to protect Patricia. And Silas, broken and scared, did what he was told. You're telling me Marchetti forced Silas Vance to kill himself? I'm telling you the truth. I saw it happen. I was there. Marchetti stood over Silas with a gun and told him to do it, or his daughter would die. Silas took the gun and pulled the trigger. I felt the world tilt. The story I'd been told, the suicide note, the despair, the betrayal, it was all a lie. Marchetti hadn't driven Vance to suicide. He'd murdered him, made it look like a suicide. The note, I said, the suicide note. Did Marchetti write it? No. Silas wrote it, under duress. Marchetti told him what to say, and Silas wrote it down. It was a confession to everything Marchetti had done. He made Silas confess to Marchetti's own crimes. And you've known this all along? I knew it the night it happened. I was in the next room, listening. I was waiting to see if Silas would fight. He didn't. He was too scared for Patricia. Why didn't you tell anyone? Boyle's face twisted. Because I was a coward. I was the one who brought Marchetti into the business. I vouched for him. Silas trusted me, and I led him to his death. I've been carrying that guilt for 3 years. That's why I killed Marchetti. Not for Barone, not for the money, for Silas. I sat in silence, the weight of his confession pressing down on me. The whole case had been built on a foundation of lies. Marchetti was a killer. Haggerty was a crook. Eleanor was a victim. And Frankie Boyle was a man trying to atone for a sin that could never be forgiven. You know what this means, I said. It means Patricia's father was murdered, not driven to suicide. Murdered. And Marchetti was the one who did it. Murder, suicide. The end result is the same. Silas is dead, and the man who killed him is dead too. There's a difference, I said, to Patricia, to the law, to justice. Boyle looked at me, his eyes empty. Do you think justice matters to me anymore? I've done what I had to do. I've avenged Silas. Now I'm ready to face the consequences. I stood up, my hands flat on the table. You're going to tell this story, to the DA, to the grand jury, to anyone who'll listen. You're going to make sure Patricia knows the truth about her father's death. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. Because it's the only way to undo some of the damage you've caused. Boyle laughed again, but there was no humor in it. There's no undoing what I've done. There's just what comes next. Then tell the truth, I said, and maybe when you're sitting in your cell, you'll have at least one good thing to hold on to. I walked out of the room and left him there, cuffed to the floor, staring at nothing. The guard led me back through the corridors, past the bars and the cells and the hollow-eyed men who'd given up hope long ago. The rain had stopped when I emerged into the street. The clouds were breaking, thin shafts of light breaking through the gray. I stood on the sidewalk and lit a cigarette, letting the smoke curl around me. Patricia was waiting for me at Murphy's apartment. I'd have to tell her the truth, about her father, about Marchetti, about what really happened that night 3 years ago. It was going to break her heart. But she deserved to know. Some secrets, I thought, are too heavy to carry alone, and some truths, no matter how painful, need to be told. I dropped the cigarette, crushed it under my heel, and walked into the light. The DA's office was packed when I walked in. Crawford was there, looking like a man who'd just been handed a winning lottery ticket. Eleanor Marchetti sat in a chair near the window, her face pale and drawn, her hands cuffed in her lap. Haggerty was in the corner, his eyes fixed on the floor, a beaten man who'd finally run out of luck, and Frankie Boyle stood against the wall, flanked by 2 federal marshals, his bruised face a mask of resignation. Patricia was there too. She'd come with me, her hand gripping my arm like I was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting beneath her feet. Crawford cleared his throat and called the room to order. We're here to finalize the charges and hear the testimony of the key witnesses, he said. Mr. Nile, you've been instrumental in uncovering the truth. I'd like you to lay out the case for the record. I stepped forward, my hands in my pockets, my voice steady. Leo Barone ran a criminal enterprise that stretched from the waterfront to the city council. He used violence and intimidation to control the docks, the construction industry, and a network of corrupt officials. Arthur Marchetti was his partner, but when Marchetti decided to cooperate with federal authorities, Barone ordered his death. Frankie Boyle carried out the order, but he had his own reasons. Those reasons being revenge. Silas Vance, Patricia's father, was Marchetti's original partner. Marchetti had Vance murdered, made it look like a suicide. He forced Vance to write a confession to Marchetti's own crimes, then stood over him with a gun and told him to pull the trigger. Boyle was there. He saw it happen. A murmur went through the room. Eleanor's face went pale. Haggerty looked up, his eyes widening. Patricia's grip on my arm tightened. Marchetti's murder was supposed to look like a mob hit, I continued, and in a way it was. But the real motive was Boyle's guilt. He'd brought Marchetti into the business. He'd vouched for him. And when Marchetti destroyed Vance, Boyle carried that guilt for 3 years. Boyle stepped forward, his voice rough. It's true, every word. I killed Arthur Marchetti because he murdered Silas Vance. I wanted him to pay for what he'd done. But I also wanted to put an end to the whole rotten operation. Marchetti had cancer, and I cut him out. By killing him? Crawford asked. By doing what the law couldn't. By making sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. Crawford turned to Eleanor. Mrs. Marchetti, what do you have to say? Eleanor's voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't know about Silas Vance. I knew Arthur was involved in things he shouldn't have been, but I didn't know about the murder. I swear to you, I didn't know. Then why did you help cover it up? Because I was scared. Arthur told me Barone would kill me if I talked. He said the only way to stay alive was to keep my mouth shut and do what I was told. When Arthur was killed, I panicked. I called Haggerty because I knew he was on Barone's payroll. I thought if I could keep Barone happy, he'd leave me alone. Did you love your husband? Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I did. I still do. despite everything. He wasn't a good man, but he was my husband. I didn't want him to die. I just wanted the nightmare to end. I looked at Haggerty. Lieutenant, anything to add? He shook his head, his voice hollow. I'm guilty. I took money from Baron for 5 years. I covered up his crimes. I helped him get away with murder. And when Marchetti was killed, I did everything I could to make sure the trail led away from Baron. I'm not proud of it, but that's the truth. Crawford nodded, making notes. And Patricia Vance, what was your role in all of this? Patricia stepped forward, her voice steady but fragile. I was looking for the truth about my father. I went to work for Marchetti to find out what really happened. I found the suicide note, and I knew it wasn't real. I knew my father had been forced to write it, but I didn't have proof. I spent 18 months gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. And the matchbook, the one with Eleanor's name on it. Patricia's face flushed. I planted it. I wrote Eleanor's name on the matchbook and left it on Marchetti's body. I wanted the police to think she was involved. I didn't care who went to prison as long as Baron and Marchetti paid for what they'd done to my father. You were willing to let an innocent woman take the fall? I was willing to do whatever it took to get justice, Patricia said, her voice cracking. My father is dead, his reputation was destroyed, and the men who'd killed him were walking around free, living off the money they'd stolen from him. I was angry, I was desperate, and I wasn't thinking clearly. But you didn't actually kill anyone. No, I didn't, but I would have. If Harry hadn't stopped me, I would have killed Frankie Boyle, and I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. I stepped in, my voice calm but firm. Patricia did wrong, but she also did what no one else was willing to do. She preserved the evidence that brought down Baron. She kept the suicide note safe. She forced the truth into the light, and when she had the chance to walk away, she stayed. Crawford leaned back, his gaze sweeping the room. This is a lot to process, but I think we can agree that Leo Baron is the primary architect of this conspiracy. The charges against him are enough to put him away for life. Haggerty will face trial for bribery and obstruction. Frankie Boyle will stand trial for the murder of Arthur Marchetti, and Eleanor Marchetti will be charged with conspiracy to obstruct justice. And Patricia, Crawford paused, she'll be charged with tampering with evidence. But I'll recommend leniency, given her cooperation and the circumstances surrounding her father's death. Patricia let out a breath I didn't know she'd been holding. I squeezed her hand and turned to leave. Wait, Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the room. I want to say something. To Patricia. Patricia froze, her face pale. Eleanor looked at her, her eyes red-rimmed, her voice barely audible. I'm sorry for everything. For what Arthur did to your father, for the lies I told, for the pain I caused you. I know it doesn't change anything, but I want you to know that I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to survive. Patricia stared at her, the anger and grief playing across her face. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she nodded, a slow, almost imperceptible movement. I know, I believe you, but that doesn't make it right. No, Eleanor said, it doesn't, but it's the truth. The marshals led her away. Haggerty followed, his head bowed. Boyle went last, his eyes meeting mine for a brief, unreadable moment. Then they were gone, and the room was silent. Patricia looked at me, her eyes wet but clear. What happens now? You go home, you rest, you try to live the life your father would have wanted for you. And you let the courts do their job. And you, what will you do? I lit a cigarette, letting the smoke curl around me. I'll do what I always do. I'll wait for the next case to walk through my door, and I'll do my best to make sure the truth comes out, no matter how ugly it is. She smiled, a thin, fragile thing. Thank you, Harry, for everything. Don't thank me, just promise me you'll take care of yourself. I will. I walked her out into the rain. The sky was still gray, the streets still wet, but somewhere in the distance the clouds were breaking. Thin shafts of sunlight cut through the gloom, painting the city in shades of gold and silver. I stopped at the corner and watched her walk away, her steps slow but steady. She was going to be fine. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. I dropped my cigarette, crushed it under my heel, and headed for my car. The case was over. The truth was out. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. But I knew it wouldn't last. It never does in this city. There's always another case, another lie, another secret waiting to be uncovered. And I'd be there, standing in the rain, ready to dig it up. Because that's what I do. That's who I am, Harry Nile, private investigator. The man who gets paid to look into the darkness and find the truth. Tonight, the darkness had disappeared, but tomorrow it will come back, and so would I. The trial lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of testimony, cross-examination, and the slow, grinding machinery of justice doing what it does best, grinding slow. I sat in the back of the courtroom most days, watching the parade of witnesses, the lawyers in their expensive suits, the judge in his black robes looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Barone's defense was flimsy. He tried to blame everything on Marchetti, claiming he was just a businessman who'd been used by a dead man. But the evidence was too strong. The suicide note, the ledger, the testimony of Haggerty and Boyle and Eleanor. And finally, Patricia's quiet, steady account of everything she'd seen and heard. The jury took 4 hours to deliberate. 4 hours of sitting in the hall, smoking cigarettes, watching the rain streak down the windows. 4 hours of waiting for a verdict that felt inevitable. When they came back, the courtroom was silent. The foreman stood, unfolded the paper, and read the words that would change everything. Guilty on all counts. Barone's face went white. His lawyers started arguing, but it was too late. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was led away in chains, his eyes meeting mine for a brief, bitter moment. Then he was gone. Haggerty got 15 years. Eleanor got 5, with the possibility of parole after 3. Boyle was convicted of manslaughter. The jury had sympathized with his motive and sentenced to 10 years. Patricia was given a suspended sentence and probation. She'd get to keep her freedom, but she'd never be able to escape what she'd done. I didn't feel triumphant when it was over. I felt tired. The kind of tiredness that settles into your bones and makes you wonder why you bother getting up in the morning. Murphy was waiting for me outside the courthouse. She handed me a cup of coffee, black and hot, and we stood in the rain for a long moment, saying nothing. "You did good, Harry," she finally said. "I did what needed to be done." "That's the same thing." I shook my head. "It's not, but it's close enough." We walked back to the office, the rain soaking through our coats, the streets slick and empty. The building was dark when we arrived, the windows fogged, the whole place smelling like old paper and regret. I sat down behind my desk, the familiar creak of the chair a small comfort. Murphy poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot she'd made that morning. Cold now, but she didn't seem to mind. "What's next?" she asked. "I don't know. I'll wait for the phone to ring. That's usually how it works. And if it doesn't ring, then I'll have a quiet month. Maybe take a vacation. Go somewhere sunny, somewhere where it doesn't rain all the time. You hate sunny places. I hate rain too. It's a complicated relationship." Murphy laughed, a warm sound that cut through the gloom. "You're impossible, Harry. I know. That's why you keep me around." She left me alone after that, heading home to her own life, her own troubles. I sat in the dark office, listening to the rain, and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. Arthur Marchetti was dead. Leo Barone was in prison. Eleanor Marchetti was paying for her crimes. Frankie Boyle was paying for his, and Patricia Vance was free, but at a cost that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Justice had been served, but it hadn't fixed anything. Marchetti was still dead. Vance was still dead. The lives that had been destroyed were still destroyed. All we'd done was make sure the people responsible faced the consequences. It wasn't much, but in this city, in this line of work, it was enough. The phone rang the next morning. I picked it up, my voice rough from lack of sleep. "Harry Nile Investigations." "Mr. Nile, my name is Evelyn Parker. I need your help." I reached for my notebook, a fresh cigarette, and the familiar weight of the case settling on my shoulders. "What's the problem, Mrs. Parker?" "It's my husband. He's been missing for 3 days. The police say they can't do anything until he's been gone for a week. But I know something's wrong. He's never been away this long without calling." "Tell me about your husband." "His name is David. He's a banker. We've been married for 12 years. He's quiet, steady, and reliable. He would never just disappear like this." "Any enemies? Business rivals? Someone who might want to hurt him?" "Not that I know of, but there was something strange a few weeks ago. He came home late, looking pale. He said he'd been followed. He said someone had been watching him." "Did he say who?" "He wouldn't tell me. He said it was better if I didn't know." "But I'm scared, Mr. Nile. I'm scared of what might have happened to him." I let out a long breath, the smoke curling around me. I'll take the case. I'll find your husband. Thank you so much. I hung up the phone, stared at the rain-streaked window, and felt the familiar pull of another mystery, another truth waiting to be uncovered. The case was over, but the work never ended. I grabbed my coat, my hat, and my revolver, and stepped out into the rain. The city was waiting. The darkness was waiting, and somewhere out there a missing banker was waiting for someone to find him. I walked down the wet streets, past the neon signs and the closed shops, past the drunks and the dreamers and the broken souls who called this city home. The rain kept falling, steady and relentless, washing the streets clean of everything but the truth. I stopped at the corner and lit a cigarette, the flame flickering in the damp air. The smoke curled up, mingling with the fog, disappearing into the night. In this line of work you don't get happy endings, you get endings. Sometimes they're satisfying, sometimes they're not, but they're always final. Arthur Marchetti was dead, Silas Vance was dead, Leo Baroni was in prison, and somewhere out there, a woman named Evelyn Parker was waiting for news about her husband. That was the thing about this job. There was always another case, another mystery, another person who needed help, and I'd be there, standing in the rain, waiting for the truth to come out, because that's what I do, that's who I am. Harry Nile, private investigator, the man who walks into the darkness and comes out with answers. It's not a glamorous life, it's not a happy life, but it's mine, and in this city, in this rain, it's enough. I dropped the cigarette, crushed it under my heel, and walked into the night,